Hey guys, tonight we start with the kind of envelope you don't expect to see outside a movie or maybe a Renaissance-era mystery novel. Thick, cream-colored parchment, a wax seal pressed with the insignia of a crowned lion holding a rose, and a single phrase in looping script, "You are summoned, midnight, wear black." You blink, not because the message doesn't feel real, but because somehow deep down it does. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and local time in the comments. I want to know what corner of the world you're drifting off from tonight. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You sit with the envelope for a while, turning it in your hands. The paper smells faintly of old books and lavender. You crack the seal and the note inside simply reads, "The house waits, 3:33 a.m. Below, a set of coordinates and the same wax symbol, embossed this time in silver. And somehow you go. You dress in black. You take a quiet car ride through winding roads flanked by fields and tall hedges. The driver doesn't speak. Maybe they're part of it. Maybe they're not even real. The house appears on a hill, barely lit by the crescent. Moon vines curled like fingers around its balconies. It's the kind of place that definitely isn't on Google Maps, unless you search with very specific knowledge. Knowledge passed down, whispered from ancestor to ancestor, or perhaps written in ink that only appears under candlelight. A woman opens the front door before you even knock. She wears gloves and a silk mask that gleams like water. "You're late," she says with a knowing smile, although you're quite certain you're exactly on time. The hall is quiet, except for the sound of an antique clock ticking. Tick, 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 the kind of ticking that feels meaningful. You follow her down corridors lined with portraits. Their eyes seem to follow you. Maybe it's just oil paint tricks, or maybe it's because someone in those frames looks disturbingly like you. A great-great-grandparent, a double from another timeline. You're led to a small room with velvet wallpaper and an hourglass the size of a toddler. It's already half drained, the white sand moving faster than it should. "Wait here," she says, "until the door opens by itself. Do not speak, do not sit, you stand. For 10 minutes, for maybe an hour." Time plays tricks. You start to notice things. The way the chandelier flickers every 43 seconds, the quiet hum behind the walls, the faint scent of burnt rosemary, or maybe sage. Then the door creaks. No one on the other side. Just a spiral staircase descending into shadow, flickering with candlelight and faint music. You descend step by step, and with each step you remember something you've never known before. A name, Lysandra. A motto, Lux et umbra vincunt. A family emblem. A snake eating its tail surrounded by a crown of ivy. This is not just a gathering. It is a return. You enter a vaulted chamber where 20 or 30 others stand, all in black, faces half covered with ornate masks. They nod at you. One raises a hand in a curious gesture, thumb tucked in, fingers splayed. You instinctively return it, not knowing how you know. The woman from before appears again, now in a long cloak embroidered with stars. She speaks without raising her voice, but the sound carries perfectly. "Welcome, lost ones." We begin. A silver bell chimes and a hush falls. The group stands in a circle. A map is unrolled at the center, made of stitched leather and inked with languages you almost recognize. Latin, Phoenician, Klingon. Hard to tell at this hour. A man steps forward. "Tonight," he says, "we revisit the old council, the pact our forebears signed beneath the comet of 1264. Yes, that was a real comet, by the way. Mainstream historians chalk it up as a celestial coincidence tied to medieval superstition. But some fringe researchers believe it aligned perfectly with a sudden wave of secret treaties among noble families. Pacts that remain buried in archives, too dusty for interns to care about. He continues, "Tonight you remember, and you do. You remember riding through thick forests in armor so ornate it probably couldn't protect anything vital. You remember pouring ink into hollow rings to sign missives meant only for 3 living people. You remember a name they told you to forget, your true name in this order. You are no longer just a guest. You are a returner. The man approaches you. In his hands, a book made of wood and wrapped in silk. He opens it, revealing a page with your initials already carved in it. He does not ask if you accept. You already have. Take the oath, he says. You. Raise your hand, echoing his gesture. Words come from your mouth that don't feel like your own. I vow to walk in shadow and light, to guard what must not wake, to share only with those who already know, and to forget what should not linger. There's a long silence, then applause but not loud. Just fingertips brushing together, a sound like falling leaves. A sacred hush. Historians still argue whether secret societies among the nobility ever held real power or were just elaborate. Clubs for bored lords with too much money and not enough dragons to slay. But standing there reciting vows in a tongue older than most dictionaries, you can't help but feel it. These people didn't just pretend to hold the strings, they wove them. And now, you're holding one. In a corner of the room, a robed woman carefully sets an antique timer and begins mixing powdered minerals in a copper bowl. Elixir for the dream memory, she mutters. Drink fast or forget it all by sunrise. A small vial is pressed into your hand. The liquid glows faintly blue. Honestly, it looks like windshield wiper fluid, but smells like cardamom and childhood. You drink. Everything sharpens. The walls pulse with faint inscriptions you hadn't seen before. The candlelight turns golden. The bell chimes again. The initiation has begun. The room shifts subtly as the bell's final chime dissolves into silence, like the floor just sighed beneath your feet. You feel the temperature drop by a few degrees, though no one seems to notice. Or maybe they're just very practiced at pretending they don't notice. Either way, the effect is immediate. The air feels denser, thick with centuries. The cloaked figures begin to move in a practiced, spiraling rhythm, forming new clusters and breaking apart in perfect sync. No one speaks, but they all know the dance. And oddly, so do you. Your feet begin to carry you, slow and deliberate, until you're standing in front of an ornately carved chair. Not a throne exactly, but more than a seat. On its arms, the same. Emblem as before, the snake devouring itself looped with ivy. The sigil of the Ouroboran court. You sit. Not because anyone tells you to, but because your body already remembers how this works. The woman in the star-studded cloak steps toward a massive tapestry hung on the far wall. With a flick of her wrist, she draws it aside, revealing a strange artifact, part astrolabe, part clock, part with sculpture. It's made of brass and bone, its surface etched with constellations and family crests. The thing hums slightly, like a wasp trapped in a mason jar. And it moves. She calls it the inheritance engine. The term sounds delightfully nonsensical, like a steampunk gadget you'd find in a video game side quest. But as you watch the interlocking arms rotate and click, you realize it's calculating something, or perhaps revealing something. It tracks every bloodline, she says, her voice barely above a whisper. Every bond, broken or whole, and most importantly, every oath. You wonder if that includes your little pinky promise to your cousin back in 3rd grade. But the machine seems unbothered by playground contracts. It glows softly, and a new symbol emerges on its central disk. Yours. Tonight, we begin where it began, she continues, gesturing toward a stone pedestal in the center of the chamber. There, resting under a veil of lace, is a single worn scroll tied with a red ribbon. The Codex Lysandri, she says, written during the reign of King Baldwin IV, a record of the First Noble Pact. Now here's the mainstream history bit. Baldwin IV, known as the Leper King, ruled Jerusalem during the height of the Crusader period. Officially, there's no mention of secret societies in his court, but there were sudden shifts in alliances, surprise disappearances of powerful nobles, and several letters historians can't fully interpret, written in codes no one has yet cracked. The woman unrolls the scroll, carefully flattening the brittle parchment. Even from where you sit, you see the handwriting is intense. Tight loops, swooping curves, ink so dark it looks like it bled through time. She reads, "Let the houses be bound by silence and the sword. Let the truth be held by shadow and shared. Only in moonlight. Let those who vow forget their name and remember only the cause. For kingdoms crumble, but blood remembers." As the final line echoes off the vaulted ceiling, Several members raise their hands again in that silent four-fingered salute. You do too. You're in now. Or back in. Still hard to say which. The woman's tone shifts. We study now the fracture. Of 1387. A low hum of recognition ripples through the room. You get the sense that this moment is less popular among the group. Like the uncomfortable family dinner topic no one wants to bring up, but everyone remembers. Apparently, back in the 14th century, one of the founding houses, House Valcora, decided they were tired of secrecy. One of the dukes wanted to modernize the order. His great idea? Publish select parts of the pact in allegorical poetry and leak it to the court of the French king. It went poorly. Some say he was mad, the woman explains. Others say he saw the future. Historians still argue whether he truly broke ranks out of rebellion, or whether he was manipulated by the early agents of the Illuminati. Yes, that Illuminati, or Illuminati as they're more often known now. Fringe theorists love throwing them into everything from pop music to fast food menus. But within this room, the tone is less sensational. They are described simply as the opposition, the mirror image of the noble societies, formed not for stewardship but for disruption. Not keepers of balance, but fans of chaos. The Illuminari's origins remain murky. Some say they began with a rogue scholar in the Vatican archives. Others say they were birthed from a misread prophecy during a lunar eclipse. The truth, as always, probably lives somewhere in between. Back to 1387. The scrolls record that House Valcora was formally unbound from the circle, which is a fancy way of saying erased. Not killed necessarily, this isn't an action movie, just made to vanish. Lands redistributed, names forgotten, their children raised in distant provinces under new names, and their sigil, a crowned moth scrubbed from every record. You ask silently if that kind of thing is even possible. The man next to you seems to hear your thought. He leans over, whispering, "The trick isn't hiding what was, it's filling the gaps with something else, a better story, one they'll believe." Chilling. The woman closes the Codex Lysandri with gentle reverence. She replaces the veil, bows slightly to the artifact and turns. "It's not just ceremony," she says. "It's memory. These rituals aren't pageantry, they're architecture. Our ancestors built truth like a cathedral, brick by coded brick. Your job is to maintain it." The phrase hits you like a soft punch to the soul. Maintain the cathedral of truth. You look around. Every person in the chamber carries this responsibility. Quietly, daily, sometimes through diplomacy, sometimes through more obscure channels. And the scroll. It isn't just a record, it's a living contract. A new member steps forward now, younger than the rest. Their robe is dark green, embroidered with thorns. They unroll another scroll, this one written in a language that looks like it's trying not to be read. This is the infamous Tessera Manus, the Split Hand Treaty. It's rumored to have caused 3 noble duels, a papal resignation, and the mysterious flooding of the Rhine Market District in 1431. Officially, that last one is blamed on poor dam construction, but records show 3 dam engineers disappeared the night before it burst, and their names match the margins of the Tessera Manus. Just another coincidence, surely. The young initiate begins to read, their voice trembling just slightly. The sea. Bond of 5 was never meant to be 6. When 6 stand, one must fall. You shiver. And not because the room is cold. The words, "when 6 stand, one must fall," hang there like frost in the air. Delicate, menacing, and almost too quiet to speak against. You feel it lodge somewhere in your chest, a line written in the ink of old warnings and broken alliances. Around you, the members are motionless, eyes half-lidded as though in trance or deep memory. You can't tell if this is reverence or dread. The young initiate folds the scroll and steps back, their movement rehearsed, like muscle memory from a life they never remembered learning. They bow, not low, just enough. And then, without a word, they disappear into the shadows of the chamber, literally. No creaking door, no soft footfalls, just not there anymore. You blink, but no one else reacts. All right then, the woman in the star cloak, who has, at this point, taken on the vibe of your favorite history teacher, crossed with a fairy tale villain, walks toward a carved alcove in the wall. She places her palm against a small bronze relief of a crowned falcon. There's a soft hiss, and a concealed panel opens inward to reveal a stairwell spiraling downward. "You've heard of the catacombs beneath Paris," she says, her voice light now. "But these are older, quieter, far more selective about who they allow in." You follow, feet echoing on stone, the group descending like a single ripple down a well. As you reach the base, the temperature drops again. Here, among walls, slick with condensation and age, sit rows of narrow niches, each holding a single object: a glove, a cracked lens, a snuff box shaped like a serpent eating its own tail. Nothing that makes immediate sense, until she starts naming them. Here lies the right hand of Baron Remarque, the one he used to sign the Treaty of Hollowmere before it burned and regrew. Her shard of the mirror that showed Queen Sibylla her death. The ring worn by all 6 members of the first betrayal, only one came back with it. You feel very small in this hallway of relics. She pauses before a particularly empty-looking. "Tanish, this one is waiting," she says. "For you." Cute. No pressure at all. She continues walking and begins recounting the fall of another house. House Glanwine. Now here's the mainstream fact historians agree on. The Glanwine family did exist in England during the late Tudor period. They were minor nobles, known for their unusual interest in metallurgy, alchemy, and theatre funding. Weird combo, sure, but weirder still. Every member of their direct line vanishes from record around 1591. Some say plague, some say bankruptcy, but the Glanwyn Manor, perfectly preserved, staff intact, table set, food half-eaten. No signs of struggle, no documents left behind. And oddly, every mirror in the house shattered. The noble society, of course, has another theory. House Glanwine attempted a convergence, the woman says. A forbidden practice meant to merge multiple oaths into a single bloodline. Greedy, unstable, they were warned. You try to imagine what it means to merge oaths, like crossing horoscopes with family drama and a pact with time itself. Predictably, it didn't end well. They weren't erased like Valcora. They were unraveled. "There's a difference," she adds, noticing your frown. "Erasure is silence. Unraveling is noise that never stops." Another delightful bedtime thought. Historians still argue whether the Glanwyn disappearance was orchestrated by the Crown, the Church, or no one at all. But in the catacombs, it's gospel. Every noble society from Edinburgh to Florence remembers Glanwyn as a cautionary tale, and sometimes their descendants claim to still see echoes of the house in glass surfaces and music boxes that play unbidden. Quirky, yes. Terrifying? Also, yes. She gestures again, and you move deeper into the tunnels. Now comes the strange bit. In the next chamber sits a long wooden table, set with empty pewter cups and ancient coins placed in a spiral around them. You can practically smell the iron in the air. This, she says, is the wager table. Apparently, when conflicts among the noble families reached deadlock, when no vote or vow could solve it, they turned to this. Each party would place a coin representing their house lineage. Then they'd make a bet, not for gold, not for land, for fate. One example? In 1742, House Lornis wagered the fertility of their next generation. They lost. Their family line ends with 3 sisters, all cloistered away in a convent in Andalusia. Another, a duel of truths in 1811, House Cantaro bet their collective memory. When they lost, every surviving member woke up the next morning, not knowing who they were, or why their ceilings bore stars they couldn't name. No bloodshed, no witnesses, just memory, snipped cleanly like the thread of a forgotten dream. The woman smiles gently, and it's the kind of smile that makes your bones want to shiver a little. "This is why we do not play games with truth," she says, brushing, a finger across the table's edge. As you absorb this, a tall man with silver rings approaches. He has a grin that suggests either amusement or very recent resurrection. He nods toward you. "You haven't asked about the shadow hall," he says. "I'm impressed. You hadn't. Because frankly, you didn't want to." He takes that as permission. "The shadow hall is where broken oaths go," he explains, "where the names once spoken in loyalty now echo in rebellion. Apparently, every noble society has a record of its betrayals, but rather than destroy those names, they file them. Each name carved into a small obsidian plate. Each plate shelved in a vault no one visits unless absolutely necessary. Sometimes those plates vibrate or glow. One even cracked itself in half, the moment the descendant of its name walked into the wrong city. Fringe believers say these records aren't passive at all, that they whisper to each other, that they plot, that every secret society, no matter how noble its origin, eventually grows a twin made of rot and shadow. Historians, of course, roll their eyes. "Sounds like Victorian melodrama," they scoff. But the man with the rings, he just laughs. "Melodrama," he says, "is the language of secrets too loud to whisper." The woman raises her hand again, not for silence this time, but invitation. You follow her gaze to a final alcove. It holds a simple item, a mask. Porcelain, blank, except for a single golden tear painted below the right eye. It's beautiful. It's sad, it's terrifying, and it's yours for what? You're not sure, but something inside you says you've worn it before. You reach out and touch the porcelain mask. It's cold, colder than stone, colder than your own breath fogging faintly in the air, and as your fingertips graze the painted tear, the room tilts, not literally, just enough to make you question which way is up and whether time is still moving forward. You blink once, twice, and suddenly you're no longer in the catacombs. The mask is still in your hand, but the air is warmer now. Perfumed with orange blossoms and frankincense, you're standing on a balcony overlooking an impossibly symmetrical garden, one that pulses faintly under the moonlight like a living maze. Below, figures in elaborate attire flit between hedgerows and marble fountains, their faces hidden behind masks that glitter like constellations. Laughter floats up to you, light and musical but somehow hollow. Off you glance around, no one else seems to have noticed the shift. The woman with the star cloak leans on the balcony rail beside you. Her expression is unreadable. "This is how the midnight courts remember," she says. "Ah, great. Apparently this place, this memory, vision, dream, is a reconstruction of one of the most infamous noble society gatherings in European history. The Masque of the 13th Oath. Here's the mainstream fact. In the early 1700s, there was a well-documented masquerade held at Chateau Briarfort in southern France. Records show that every noble from Paris to Florence received an invite. Many of them arrived. None of them were ever seen again. Naturally, rumors spiraled. Some say the ceiling collapsed in a freak structural accident. Others insist there was poison in the wine. A few, boldly, suggest mass hallucination due to exotic incense. But the strangest thing, not a single servant disappeared. The entire support staff returned home, unaware anything unusual had occurred. Historians still argue whether the event was a cover-up for a political purge or something more spiritual. Tonight, you're walking into that theory. As you descend the marble staircase into the masquerade, the woman explains that the Masque of the 13th Oath wasn't a party. It was a trial, a ritual designed to test the unity of 13 noble houses, each sworn to uphold the balance of something called the Veil Accord. You don't get all the details because one of the masked dancers interrupts with a bow and an extended hand. You take it. Of course you do. You're very brave in dreams. They spin you into the ballroom where music lilts from unseen violins. There's something mathematical in the rhythm, almost like it's counting. And sure enough, after a few moments, you realize the dancers are always in sets of 13. They rotate like clockwork, each shift moving one person to the center. Whoever stands there during a specific note, their mask shatters, not explodes, not cracks, just quietly falls apart. Each time, the group pauses, bows and continues as if nothing happened. The woman explains that during the masque, betrayal was tested through resonance. If your oath had faltered, even in thought, the rhythm would reveal it. She looks at you. Would yours survive? You think of all the promises you've made in your life. Most weren't in blood. but some were silent, secret ones. The kind you whisper into pillows or swear under breath during heartbreak. You don't answer. Instead, you ask about the term she used, the veil accord. She nods, pleased. The accord, apparently, was a pact formed between noble families to keep a balance between visibility and secrecy, between what the public saw and what the houses truly controlled. Trade, science, belief systems, even the shaping of languages. In short, they filtered knowledge, not to hoard power, at least not entirely, but to protect the fabric of consensus. Reality, no biggie. The woman mentions a quirky detail. The accord required that every house plant one false invention per decade into public knowledge, just a decoy to muddy the waters. You laugh. Like what? Oh, the French guillotine, she says. The original model had no blade. Pardon? It used sound, she adds with a wink. But that story didn't test well with the revolutionaries, so they gave it a more dramatic arc. Historians roll their eyes at this claim, of course, and yet there are records of alternate execution devices proposed before the guillotines. Standardization, many of which were uncomfortably abstract. You're about to ask more, but a figure in black silk steps into the ballroom center. Everyone freezes. This, the woman whispers, is the moment it went wrong. The black-masked figure, rumored to be from a house no longer recognized, spoke a name no one remembered. A true name, not a title, not a code name. The kind of name that undoes people. Every mask dropped, every dancer collapsed except one. The figure in the center stood still, mask intact, and said only, "They broke the veil. I will rebuild it." That person was never identified. But their mask? It eventually appeared in 3 different locations over the next century. A monastery in the Alps, a theater prop room in Vienna, and the pocket of a man who claimed he'd never worn it. All 3 were identical. Tonight, in this memory, the mask is still on the figure's face, but they turn slowly toward you. You've heard my name, they say. You haven't, at least you think you haven't. Still, your pulse flutters. The music stops. Everyone vanishes. And just like that, you're back in the catacombs, the porcelain. Mask in your hand, but now it's warm, almost pulsing. The woman places her hand over yours. "You didn't survive the dance," she says, "but you remembered the step." Well, that's cryptic. She leads you into yet another corridor, one that hums faintly with electricity. At its end sits a room full of books bound in soft leather and sealed with wax stamps. You've reached the archive. Here, every noble house keeps a record, not of its victories, but its failures. One particularly thick volume catches your eye. It's labeled simply, "The Ones Who Spoke Too Soon." Inside you find notes, letters, even sketches of inventions that were abandoned because they were too true. Things like a machine that could measure loyalty, or a formula that turned memory into paper. One note reads, "Truth is a beast best kept tethered. We fed it once, it remembered the taste." Charming. And now a question bubbles in your mind. What happens when someone uninvited stumbles into all this? The woman smiles again. "You're not uninvited," she says. "You just haven't remembered your house yet." Right. No pressure. You pause at the edge of the archive, the soft glow of bioluminescent fungi brushing the walls in faint strokes of green and blue. Somewhere behind you, the echo of that ballroom violin riff still lingers like a scent you can't quite name. You're starting to realize that in this realm of noble secrets, time folds in on itself, like poorly ironed linen. So yes, if you're feeling slightly unhinged, congratulations, you're paying attention. You step further into the archive, your fingertips grazing book spines that hum ever so slightly under your touch. Each is sealed with a different crest. Some you recognize, some that look like someone just slammed a typewriter against a jellyfish and called it calligraphy. The woman, your semi-helpful, delightfully cryptic guide, trails behind you with a sort of casual menace. This next part, she says, gets a little conspiratorial. Oh good, just what you needed. Shadowy, noble drama with a dash of tinfoil. She leads you to a narrow alcove, walls lined with scrolls bound in ribbon instead of wax. "These are the compacts of anonymity," she explains. drawn up by nobles who wanted influence, without attribution. Think of it like aristocratic burner accounts, secret contracts unsigned, and sometimes written in invisible ink that only appears when the reader feels shame, which is why some scrolls remain blank forever. This section of the archive focuses on the hidden scepters, an informal coalition of noble families who, in the 18th and 19th centuries, supposedly used secret societies to shape revolutions by deliberately losing them. Wait, what? Yup. According to these records, the hidden scepters weren't trying to hold on to power. They were trying to redistribute, albeit strategically. Think nobles orchestrating chaos just to rebuild under new banners, with tighter control and cleaner narratives. Mainstream historians would call this revisionist fantasy. And to be fair, it does sound a bit like a late-night Reddit post with questionable citations. But then again, one fringe document you find here outlines a curious pattern. Every major European revolution was preceded by a spike in land sales between cousins of titled families. Each shift in currency value mysteriously favored families with ties to esoteric banking lodges. And most oddly, several noblewomen of the time reported dreams in which they were asked to wear colors not yet invented. Historians still argue whether these coincidences are evidence of coordination or just the pareidolia of obsessive conspiracy theorists. Either way, the scrolls in front of you are thick with symbolism. Sundogs, black swans, mirrors cracking. Down the middle, you unroll one labeled Velvet Collapse. The paper smells like old thunder. On it a single phrase: "The crown is never lost, it's just passed beneath the table." There's a quirky detail in this collection too, something that feels like satire but isn't: the alleged existence of rogue dukes. These were nobles who rejected traditional alliances, but still moved within the noble influence circuits, like uninvited chess pieces with their own agenda. One such figure, nicknamed the Duke of No-Lands, was believed to carry a sword, with no blade. Instead, it contained a sliver of meteorite said to sever truth from belief. No one's found this sword, obviously, or if they have, they forgot to tweet about it. The woman explains that many of these scrolls were written in multiple directions, diagonal, spiraling, upside down, so the reader must rotate them like some esoteric dance to understand the full meaning. It's not just about decoding language, she says. It's about shifting your own axis of perception. Oh, so light bedtime reading. A moment later, a whisper brushes your ear. Not hers. Not yours. It comes from the scrolls. You hold your breath and listen. It's saying something about the Serpent Court. The woman stiffens. Her tone changes. That name isn't spoken aloud, she says quietly. They weren't like the hidden scepters. They didn't want balance. They wanted removal. Apparently, the Serpent Court was a splinter faction. Nobles, who believed the only way to purify the world was through elimination of inherited titles. Including their own, they infiltrated royal lines, disrupted records, and even forged letters to fracture alliances from within. Their goal wasn't revolution, it was a noble extinction, like setting the family tree on fire just to see what kind of ash remained. She guides you to a display case with an odd-looking object inside, a silver fork bent into the shape of a closed eye. This, she says, was the Serpent Court symbol, because of course it was their most infamous act, allegedly engineering the disappearance of the Tsar's third cousin, who was the actual intended heir, leaving a more manipulable sibling in place. Most scholars believe this story is complete fiction, but then again, no one's been able to explain the journal found in that cousin's empty bedroom, each page dated 5 years into the future. You're starting to see why these records stay locked in the archive. The woman stops walking. Want to see where the Serpent Court left their last message? You nod. She leads you into a spiral staircase that descends impossibly far, like, how do I still have knees distance? At the bottom, there's a single stone table. On it, etched, in a swirling serpentine font, is a single sentence: "We must bury the blood so the world may dream again." Poetic, slightly alarming, but weirdly comforting if you don't think too hard. You look at her. They buried themselves, you ask. She, shrugs, or each other. Apparently, that's the thing about secret societies among the nobility. Most don't die in battle or scandal. They dissolve in whispers, in pacts erased by the next sunrise. The greatest power, she says, is not in ruling, but in being forgotten, precisely when you choose to be. You take a final look around the archive before heading back up. The walls seem taller now, the scrolls quieter, like they've said what they needed to say. At the top of the staircase, you find your coat hanging. On a wooden peg, one that wasn't there earlier. Inside the pocket, the silver fork, of course. You don't say anything about the fork. You just slip it deeper into your pocket, like it's a completely normal bedtime souvenir from your spontaneous descent into subterranean noble weirdness. You're starting to get the hang of this. When the world of aristocratic secret societies offers you an ominously bent utensil, you smile politely and pretend you ordered the chaos. Back above the archive, the air feels a little lighter, but the hallways twist differently now. There's a tension in the stone, like the building is slightly irritated that you've seen something you shouldn't. You're ready for the masks now, says your guide matter-of-factly. You do not feel ready for the masks. But apparently, this isn't optional. She leads you to a circular room, lit only by candlelight reflecting off a series of polished gold-rimmed mirrors. Each mirror contains a mask, but not like a masquerade ball, mysterious stranger type of mask. These are more unsettling, exaggerated noses, elongated chins. One has two mouths. Another looks like a lion mid-yawn, except the yawn goes on forever. The room smells faintly of lilac and betrayal. These, she explains, are the ceremonial faces of the Cloaked Concord. According to noble law, the Cloaked Concord was less a single society and more a confederation, sort of like a bar crawl for hereditary strategists. They didn't all agree on philosophy or politics, but they did agree on one thing, the power of anonymity. Each member had a mask. They'd wear it at meetings so no one knew who was who. Titles were dropped. Family names were never spoken. Instead, members identified each other by their chosen toasts, which had to be exactly 7 syllables. One popular one? To the throne that needs no name. Another, more sarcastic. Nice sword compensating for something? You know, just noble things. Mainstream historians do acknowledge that several aristocratic secret salons in 17th and 18th century Europe practiced some form of identity masking, some literally, others metaphorically. What they debate, however, is the purpose of this obfuscation. Was it to escape political consequence, or did it serve a deeper, more ritualistic goal? You lean closer to one of the masks. It's carved from ivory with tiny etched lines at the edges like rays of sunlight. A whisper skims your thoughts. He who wears this mask speaks only in riddles. Oh, great. Apparently, some members took the commitment so seriously, they wore their masks even outside of Concord sessions, to meals, hunts, and in one unfortunate case, during a fencing match that ended poorly. Imagine trying to parry while wearing a mask shaped like a swan mid-takeoff. It's a miracle more nobles didn't trip over their own mysterious aesthetics. The woman steps beside you, gesturing toward the largest mask in the room. It's made of black glass, shaped like a tearful jester. That one, she says, belonged to the Laughing Duke. Historians argue whether he was real. Fringe theorists insist he was a fabrication designed to test loyalty. Only members who acknowledged his existence could be trusted. According to surviving letters, the Laughing Duke's trademark move was ending debates by laughing until everyone else stopped talking. Honestly, kind of effective, also incredibly annoying. And then, there's the rumor that one night, during a vote on the succession of an entire kingdom, the Laughing Duke cast his vote in silence. No laughter, no speech, just a single glance at a flickering candle which promptly went out. Everyone else followed suit. Historians don't know what was decided that night, only that the kingdom in question changed its flag design the next morning, and then banned mirrors for a full decade. You step back, glancing at your own reflection in the only unmasked mirror. Your face looks strange in this lighting, like maybe you haven't been entirely honest about who you are, or maybe the mirror's just judgmental. Your guide pulls back a curtain behind the largest mask, revealing a stairwell you definitely didn't see before. Time to meet the current inheritors. Wait, The Concorde is still active. She says nothing, just walks. The stairwell is warm, lined with red velvet, like the inside of a jewelry box. At the bottom, you find a round chamber lit by soft golden sconces. A long table sits in the center. Empty chairs surround it, but not unused. There are impressions in the cushions, a stillness in the wine glasses that suggests recent company. This is the inner parlor. Not a myth, apparently. On the far wall, a tapestry depicts a tree whose branches end in flames, but whose roots bloom into doves. Beneath it, a brass plaque reads, "We speak not to rule, but to steer." Here's the kicker. Every seat at the table is labeled not with names, but with moods. Amused, contrite, suspicious, hopeful. Allegedly, members chose their seat based on their emotional state that evening, and the mood influenced their vote. So if 3 furious votes outnumbered 2 mournful ones, well, policy followed the passion. Sounds chaotic. And, if we're being honest, very on-brand for people who wear jewel-mouth masks to dinner. Quirky detail incoming. One member reportedly switched moods mid-meeting so often, they had a special wheeled chair that could scoot between apathetic and dramatic at high speeds. You run your hand along the edge of the table. The wood pulses faintly. You get the sense it remembers, not just conversations, but intent. You wonder how many empires' courses were redirected here, how many wars were softened or sharpened because someone sat in melancholy instead of proud. There's a final detail on the tapestry. Something you didn't notice before, a small silver thread running from the roots of the dove tree. All the way off the edge of the cloth, where it disappears into the wall. You reach out, the guide stops you. "That's for later," she whispers. "Only when you've earned your own mask. You don't ask what mood yours might be. You're pretty sure it's somewhere between perplexed and snackish." You turn to follow her once more, and as you exit, you pass a plaque inscribed with a final, unsettling sentiment. To influence without being seen is the final nobility. Your reflection in the polished wall flickers, just for a second, and you swear your eyes look like someone else's. You keep walking. Not quickly, not slowly. Just that floaty, dreamlike pace where your steps seem to land half a second after you take them. Behind you, the whispers of the Concorde settle into the velvet walls. Ahead, the corridor narrows again. The guide doesn't speak, but something about the echo of your footsteps tells you you're not done with secrets yet. Not even close. The floor changes beneath you. What was once smooth stone is now faintly springy. Wood? You glance down. It's a narrow path of dark lacquered planks. On either side, black water, still fragrant, lit from beneath by a soft golden glow. Like a moonlit koi pond without the koi. You're in what used to be called the Garden of Shadows. Not a garden, and the shadows are more metaphorical than literal, though you won't swear that twice. This was once the hidden meeting place for the Noble Vale, a mostly forgotten society of high-born women who pulled more strings in European courts than anyone officially acknowledged. They weren't rulers in name, but they were advisors, confidants, secret keepers, and yes, occasionally blackmailers. What? Court politics is basically chess, except everyone cheats and the pawns are wearing wigs. Mainstream historians accept that noble women held immense behind-the-scenes influence, especially in salons and private chambers, but the idea of a coordinated group like the Noble Vale remains a fringe theory. There's no definitive record, just scraps of letters, anonymous memoirs, and a particularly incriminating recipe for lemon curd that doubles as a coded list of espionage contacts. A velvet curtain rustles on your right, and you're led into a low-ceilinged room that smells like cinnamon, candle wax, and ambition. This, your guide says, was the scriptorium of whispers. It's exactly what it sounds like. A place where secrets were written, encoded, and stored, usually for future leverage. You scan the shelves. No books, no scrolls. Instead, small painted fans line the walls, each with delicate patterns of dots and lines. Communication fans. These weren't just decorative accessories for flirtation, they were tools. One flick of the wrist, a tap of the lace. Entire conversations could unfold without a single spoken word. That's next-level gossip. One fringe. Historian believes the fans here formed a complete library of noble scandal, like a Wikipedia of whispered betrayals. Problem is, you'd need to know the code, and the code changed constantly. One week, 3 dots might mean blackmail. The next week, meet me by the soup ladle. It's hard to keep up. You walk past a large obsidian mirror, another mirror really, and catch your reflection just long enough to see that your eyes are slightly darker. The room seems to lean in, listening. You decide not to mention the soup ladle. Your guide hands you a delicate fan, pale green silk, light as air. On it, a tiny painted symbol, a weeping thistle. No dots, no lines, just that flower. She looks at you. What does it mean? You ask. She shrugs. It means whatever you're afraid it does. Cool. Not ominous at all. There's a legend about the Noble Vale's founder, Lady Aveline du Sol. Supposedly, she was once engaged to a king. When the king tried to betray her, he favored her cousin, which frankly is the least creative royal scandal possible. Aveline vanished for a year, then returned to court with a fan made from crow feathers which she never opened. Every time she entered a room, the king paled. Ministers grew silent. Servants bowed twice and not a word was spoken. Just the fan, shut, heavy with threat. Historians still argue whether she actually did anything or simply cultivated the fear that she might. One letter, unsigned but traced to a noble's handmaid, claims that Aveline never needed to open the fan because its real message was the silence that followed her. That's power. And frankly, kind of iconic. You run your finger along a red lacquered table. The dust is minimal. Either someone's been here recently, or the room itself is so intimidating that even dust particles don't linger. The back wall is covered in small drawers, each with a symbol. A rose, a dagger, a sunburst. Your guide selects one, pulls it open, and inside is a single hairpin, gold, shaped like a coiled serpent biting its own tail. This one's still active, she says. Active how? She doesn't answer. But you notice, tucked beneath the pin, a scrap of cloth embroidered with a familiar phrase. We speak, not to rule, but to steer. So okay, sure. But steer what exactly? There's another rumor, just a whisper really, that the Noble Vale had access to an international network of informants, that their fans communicated not just across ballrooms but across borders. Some speculate they orchestrated the sudden retirement of 3 dukes, the exile of a pope's advisor, and at least one suspicious pastry shortage in Prussia. You exit the scriptorium and find yourself on another of those springy wooden walkways. The water below ripples now. Something moved, but you decide not to check. The walls around you are draped in green velvet embroidered with floral patterns. The lighting changes with each step. Pink, gold, deep violet. You feel like you're walking through a living dream of noble paranoia. Your guide turns. Do you know how the Noble Vale ended? You shake your head. They didn't. They just shifted. Shifted where? Another shrug. The mirror keeps the rest. So of course you look back. The mirror's still there. Obsidian black, unmoving, solid. But now it's showing you something else. Not your reflection. Not quite. It's showing a room that looks like this one but older. Faded, a little cracked around the corners. You see women in shadowed silk, fanning themselves, walking in silence. No faces, just outlines. Like the past is playing back, not as memory, but as performance. A reenactment for the ones who dare to look. And then one of them turns her head, looks directly at you. You blink. The room is normal again. Your guide is halfway down the corridor. She doesn't wait. These people, these echoes, don't ask if you're ready. They assume you are, or that you will become so in the process of being tested. You follow. The hallway ends at a narrow circular platform. A spiral staircase rises around it, carved entirely from antler white stone. As you climb, the guide finally speaks again, softly. The nobility was never about bloodlines, she says. Not really. You glance over. What was it about? She looks at you with something like pity, or amusement, or maybe both. It was always about the game. You climb the last step, and suddenly you're outside again, but not quite the same outside. You're in a walled garden, lit by hanging lanterns and the shimmer of a half moon. There's no sound but the faint rustle of leaves and somehow the occasional clink of distant crystal glasses, like a party happening just out of view. In the center of the garden, there's a chessboard, life-size. The pieces are strange. No kings or queens, but masks. Mask-shaped bishops, mask-shaped rooks. Each pawn is shaped like a hand holding a letter. You take a step forward, and the board lights up beneath your feet. It's your move, and you realize you've been part of the game longer than you thought. The guide vanishes behind you. You're alone now, or at least you think you are. Behind you, the obsidian mirror hums faintly in the dark. Somewhere inside it, a fan flicks open. You descend the misty cobblestones of Victorian London, your boots ticking against stone slick with coal-dusted fog. The gaslights hiss above you like they're hiding secrets, probably because they are. You're not just strolling, you're being summoned. A discreet invitation scrawled on embossed parchment led you to a particular lamppost near Pall Mall, where a coach with black velvet curtains now waits. You step inside. No words are spoken, just the clink of a cane and a nod from the driver, whose eyes never meet yours. Within minutes, you're whisked away into a reality woven behind the city's public mask. The coach stops outside what appears to be a gentleman's club, all polished brass knockers and dark mahogany paneling. If you've ever walked past one of these clubs in real life, think White's or Brooks's, you'd probably imagine rotund men puffing cigars and arguing about fox hunts. But you're not here for port or politics. You're here because tonight is an initiation night, and the whispers say this club's interior was designed by an architect who later vanished without a trace. Naturally. Inside, the air is thick with candle wax and leather-bound expectations. You're guided down a hallway where portraits have eyes that never quite blink, but might. A bearded man in a tailcoat with a ceremonial key around his neck welcomes you with a solemn nod. He doesn't ask your name, he already knows it. Historians still argue whether many of these clubs were merely eccentric retreats for aristocrats, or whether they doubled as hubs of ritualistic power. Some records show overlapping memberships with the Freemasons, while others suggest an even more secretive network, the Apostolic Circle, a short-lived but powerful group said to predict and sway political outcomes. Using tea leaves, oddly enough, you're brought into a candlelit chamber. No windows, only velvet-lined walls and a domed ceiling painted with constellations. It's soundproofed naturally. A large wooden table in the shape of a stylized compass sits at the center. Around it, 12 chairs. Only 3 are occupied. Their occupants wear half masks of carved bone, painted with gold filigree. One raises a gloved hand, and you're offered a small glass of something syrupy and violet. You hesitate, but you drink. Because of course you do. The ceremony begins. Not with chanting, but with a recital. Someone reads a passage from a leather book so worn, the binding peels like old skin. It's a reflection on duality. Every nobleman must wear 2 faces, one for society and one for the order. You're not asked to speak, just to listen, to nod, and eventually to sign your name into a ledger that's older than the club itself, a ledger that only shows its ink under the right kind of flame. Yes, they have one. It smells faintly of clove and betrayal. Here's a delightful fringe tidbit. Some Victorian clubs reportedly held seances as social experiments, inviting mediums to sit among lords and baronets. One incident, described in an anonymous letter, claims a spirit scolded a duke for wearing mismatched socks to a summoning. Whether this was a real ghost or just a fashion-conscious prank, nobody knows. Tonight, your induction ends not with a blood oath or a sword tap, but with silence. One by one, the members rise and vanish through hidden doors behind the bookshelves. You remain seated, the fire crackling in time with your pulse. A final note is handed to you by a butler who smells of sandalwood and secrets. It reads, "Now that you have seen the stars beneath the city, may you never confuse their reflections for truth." You leave through a different exit, naturally. The street is quiet, but the fog is heavier. You walk past Parliament, where decisions are made in daylight, and smile softly. You know better now. Real power doesn't shout. It whispers from behind velvet curtains. As you disappear into the London mist, one last oddity lingers. The mask you wore during the ceremony, you're still holding it, but you don't remember removing it. You step out of the torchlit corridors of Versailles and find yourself beneath the vaulted ceilings of the Medici Palazzo. It's the early 1600s, and Florence smells of citrus trees and secrets. You wear a velvet doublet, far too warm for the Italian sun, and bear a ring on your finger, one that grants you access to the most peculiar gatherings. These are not salons for idle poetry or dry philosophy. No, you're being initiated into the Order of the Lily and the Dagger, a Florentine secret society said to exist solely to maintain the bloodline purity and political dominance of a small cadre of Medici cousins. The garden is lush. Statues of mythological figures glance sideways at you like they're part of the ceremony. A fountain trickles not far away, and the wind rustles the silk banners overhead, each stitched with cryptic sigils that no one outside the society is permitted to translate. A man in red robes approaches, face partially veiled. He asks you a riddle in Latin. You guess badly. He sighs, then says, close enough. Apparently it's not about the answer. It's about the willingness to try. As part of your initiation, you sip from a cup carved from a boar's tusk, allegedly passed down from Lorenzo de' Medici himself. It tastes like clove and vinegar, and something that might be wormwood. You don't ask. Behind you, another inductee faints dramatically into a pile of hedges. You make a mental note not to do the same. Though the world does start to swirl just a little, the order is more than a cocktail club for nobles bored with gold and silk. Historians still argue whether this was simply a gentleman's society or a proto-intelligence network feeding secret information to the Vatican. One surviving document, written in cipher on goat parchment, lists the order's objectives as protection of Florentine blood, elimination of false artists, and, curiously, the preservation of dreaming lions. Scholars think that last one might be metaphorical, but no one's totally sure. And here's the weird bit. The order allegedly used dreams as a kind of initiation and communication tool. Members would record their dreams, pass them to interpreters, and the resulting patterns guided real-world political decisions. It's like if Jung ran your foreign policy. One particular dream, a recurring image of Florence submerged under wine-dark water, reportedly triggered a secret campaign to assassinate a Venetian noble suspected of poisoning Tuscan exports. You may not survive this dream-based bureaucracy, but at least it smells like lavender. You feel a hand on your shoulder. A noble woman with eyes like obsidian tells you that your dream last night, yes, they know what it was, suggests you are destined to protect the Grand Duke's third son. The twist. He's 3 years old and possibly possessed by the ghost of Machiavelli. No pressure. The order meets under cover of concerts and masquerade balls. Each gathering ends with a coded dance, where partners change every 12 bars to form geometric patterns only visible from the balconies above. Just a ballet, they say, but anyone paying attention knows better. You once caught the Duchess of Mantua swapping a note during the second pirouette. It read, "The white lily blooms in Rome." Whatever that meant, 2 weeks later, a Roman senator was found locked in his library, whispering about invisible bees. As you become more entrenched, you start to realize the society's influence stretches beyond Tuscany. A dispatch from Prague suggests coordination with a Bohemian order, obsessed with alchemy and mirrors. Another letter comes from Edinburgh, full of wax seals and warnings about owls. You're starting to think Europe's entire noble class is basically one big conspiracy theory in ruffles, and then one day you're summoned. Not for a dance or a toast, but to witness a trial. A member is accused of violating the order's rules by marrying a commoner, a charming baker's daughter with spectacular focaccia. The jury wears ceremonial blindfolds. You testify that love should outweigh bloodlines, which earns you a secret wink from the oldest judge. Afterward, you're handed a gold coin that feels suspiciously heavy and hums faintly in your pocket. Gift or a tracking device? Who knows? Historians still argue whether the Order of the Lily and the Dagger actually wielded political power or simply played pretend in very expensive costumes. But letters unearthed in 1914 seem to reference floral courts and the keeper of the mirror, suggesting their reach may have lasted into modern times. You fall asleep under the stars that night, on a terrace after too much wine, dreaming of lions with wings and bakers with crowns. When you wake, there's a new tattoo on your wrist, a dagger piercing a lily. You didn't get it yourself. You blink, and the stars over Florence melt into candles flickering in the crypt of a German abbey. It's 1701, and the air here smells of stone and damp parchment. You wrap your cloak tighter around your shoulders, not because you're cold, but because you're being watched by men in robes so intricately embroidered, they look like walking constellations. You're attending a midnight rite of the Order of the Black Rose, a lesser-known yet deeply unsettling secret society tied to the Holy Roman nobility. To enter, you had to answer 3 riddles about death, time, and silence. You passed, barely. One member got tossed out for guessing eggplant when asked what grows in darkness but fears no sun. Tough crowd. You now kneel on a slab that used to be the tomb of a 10th century duke. He's still beneath it, probably rolling his eyes. Above you, a priest-turned-alchemist pours a thick black wine into a silver chalice. As you drink, the oldest member reads out a confession list from some other initiate's past life. It includes tax fraud, secret marriages, and one incident involving a goose that no one dares explain. The Black Rose claim their purpose is to guard the knowledge too heavy for ordinary men. Historians still argue whether this was spiritual metaphor or an actual attempt to preserve heretical texts smuggled out of Moorish Spain. What we do know, they owned manuscripts written in cipher, a few allegedly dictated by a nun in trance, and one bound in what might be bat skin. You don't ask. You just pretend it's leather and try not to hyperventilate. The society is obsessed with decay, not in a creepy way, well, okay, kind of creepy, but as a symbol of impermanence. They believe noble blood loses potency every few generations, and that the only way to refresh the line is through voluntary suffering, which sounds like a terrible wellness trend. You once saw a duke's son voluntarily sleep on broken glass to sharpen his legacy. He mostly sharpened his spleen. You're told you must confront your fear. That's part of your initiation, which sounds fine until they pull out a small box and set it in front of you. Inside, a mirror. You're supposed to look and say what you see. You try, "My reflection," and the master just stares at you, disappointed. You then mumble, "Ambition?" Bingo, he nods once and moves on. You're sweating. The Black Rose keeps their operations quiet, even by secret society standards. They never publish, rarely write letters, and communicate using silence and symbols. 1 rose petal on a pew or a timed meeting in 3 nights. 2 petals. It's a trap, don't go. You once missed a petal and showed up to a meeting that was actually a funeral. For a man who wasn't dead. Yet. There's a persistent theory that the Black Rose served as spiritual advisors to the Habsburgs and were partially responsible for that family's baffling decisions, like intermarrying until their family tree looked like a pretzel. One member allegedly warned Emperor Charles VI not to anger the watchful ones of the forest, but Charles ignored it and started logging anyway. That winter, wolves ate half his hunting party. Coincidence? Maybe. But the wolves wore ribbon collars when they were found, which is weird. Fringe historians point to the Black Rose as early practitioners of psychic hygiene. They'd fast for a week, then spend nights in silent catacombs to rinse the ego. Once you tried this, on night 3, you're 90% sure you saw a monk's ghost reenacting a tax audit. Even the dead can't escape bureaucracy. The most debated part of their lore involves the Bleeding Rose ritual, where initiates claim to see visions of their ancestors during meditation. A baroness once reported a vision of Charlemagne, yelling at her for using the wrong fork. Whether she was hallucinating or tapped into some ancestral Zoom call, no one can say. You find that, unlike other orders obsessed with legacy or conquest, the Black Rose seems to value humility, except when it comes to embroidery. Their cloaks are stunning and expensive. One count allegedly went bankrupt, buying black pearls for his hood's trim. Priorities. Eventually, you're assigned a task. Travel to a town in Saxony and deliver a letter to a librarian who will burn it unread. Why not just not write it, you ask? The response? We must practice futility. That sums them up, really. By the time you leave the abbey, your fingers are stained with rose dye. Your breath smells of anise and dread, and you can't stop thinking about your ambitions staring back from that mirror. You walk past a row of gravestones, each etched with only a symbol, an hourglass, a crow, a spiral. One day yours will be added. The symbol? Undecided. But you're told you'll know when the time comes. Comforting, right? You travel by carriage now, its wheels squeaking over muddy cobblestone as lanterns swing above your head. The year is 1744, and you're en route to Paris, but not the part with pastries and philosophers. You're heading to an estate in the countryside where velvet gloves conceal iron agendas. Tonight, you're entering the orbit of La Société de l'Éclipse, the Society of the Eclipse, a clandestine network born among French nobility where masks are worn not only during balls, but also when secrets are passed like poisoned bonbons. The farm. The estate is owned by a duchess with a famously sharp tongue and suspiciously youthful skin. Rumors whisper that she bathes in moonlight filtered through obsidian crystal. More likely, good lighting and an aggressive herbalist. Still, you don't mention her age unless you enjoy social suicide. You're led through the back gardens, where stone statues grin a little too wide and hedges have been trimmed into zodiac signs. The crescent moon hangs high, and you pass beneath. An arch where the symbol of the society, a closed eye inside a sun, glows faintly. You're told the eye sees only what others miss. No pressure. The Eclipse Society operates at the intersection of astronomy, mysticism, and political sabotage. They believe that celestial events mirror earthly fates, and that eclipses mark moments when power can change hands with minimal cosmic resistance. Mainstream history affirms that many nobles used astrology to guide decisions, but few went as far as the Eclipse Society, who allegedly refused to vote on any matter unless Mercury was in the correct position, which makes group projects slow. Your host, a marquis with more rings than fingers, explains their most sacred belief, that truth is a shadow, only visible when the light is partially blocked. You nod wisely while trying to decide if that's profound or just nonsense dressed in poetry. Honestly, it's both. Tonight's gathering coincides with a partial lunar eclipse. You're handed a deep blue robe stitched with tiny suns, each representing a former member. You ask if any robes have moons. Those are for those who tried to lead, your guide whispers, and failed. Cool, no pressure again. You're seated in a circle beneath a skylight. A map of the stars is projected onto the ceiling via candlelight and a curious device of mirrors and tinted glass. Equal parts science and sorcery. The Marquis reads aloud the eclipse's significance. When Luna weeps behind the shadow, the false king shall lose his crown. Which is ominous, especially considering you overheard someone say the king's valet has been acting suspiciously noble lately. Historians still argue whether societies like this truly influenced political outcomes or simply played make-believe with high stakes. But what's clear is that members often ended up involved in real conspiracies, like the affair of the diamond necklace, or that time everyone thought Marie Antoinette had a shopping addiction. One of the society's members, a quiet duchess with a fondness for puns, was later found to have authored half the anonymous pamphlets that torched the monarchy's public image. She called it moonwriting. You call it slander with flair. A fringe theory suggests the society kept a coded calendar hidden in tapestries woven with silver thread, each pattern aligned with planetary positions and secret meetings. One such tapestry vanished during the IZ Revolution and was rumored to have ended up as a tablecloth in a wine tavern. Makes you wonder if someone spilled soup on destiny. You are invited to offer your own interpretation of the eclipse. Not wanting to flunk your debut, you improvise. The moon hides to remind us that what's precious is often most vulnerable. There's a pause, then polite murmurs of approval. One older member claps slowly. You're in. Initiates are expected to keep a book of shadows and reflections, but you quickly learn this is just a journal that requires calligraphy and the occasional blood-red ink. Yours begins with tonight's lesson. Don't say, "I don't know," when someone asks about Saturn. Just nod and change the subject to tea. The evening's main event is a simulation. Yes, even secret societies have workshops. You're split into small groups and given roles in a fictional court facing betrayal. Your job? Root out the false king before the sun rises, aka before the candle timer runs out. You're suspicious of everyone, especially the countess who keeps quoting Horace and smirking. In the end, it's the least likely member, an accountant-looking baron, who wins by revealing he poisoned the fake crown and made everyone complicit. He bows. You applaud. It's all unsettlingly fun. Afterward, there's a toast with silver goblets filled with a wine so dark it's basically jam. Someone hums an old tune, something about shadows dancing at dawn. You're told it was composed by a former member who predicted the fall of the Bastille decades early. He was dismissed for overthinking things. As dawn creeps in, the society's final ritual begins. Everyone steps outside and turns their back to the horizon. The idea is that power isn't seized by looking toward it, but by knowing when to look away. You stand still, your robe damp with morning dew, while a servant rings a small bell in sets of 3. It's either symbolic or just a reminder to clear out before the cook wakes up. As you ride away in your carriage, robe bundled beside you, you can't help but glance at the moon, still faintly visible in the early light. Somewhere behind it, maybe truth really does hide, or maybe it's just the hangover. The rain is slow this evening, gentle, rhythmic. It taps like secret code against the window of your carriage, almost like the world itself is whispering. You're somewhere north of the Alps now, around the year 1790, and you've just received an invitation printed not on parchment, but etched into an obsidian slate. Cool, dramatic, and utterly impractical to carry. The sender? Der Nebelbund, the Fog Society. If the name sounds like something conjured by a sleep-deprived poet, that's because it was. Founded by a Bavarian count obsessed with illusions, Der Nebelbund was less about political influence and more about perception, misdirection, and veils, literal, ones sometimes woven into the members' cloaks. You step into a mountain villa, where the fog outside creeps in through carved stone mouths. Candles flicker in carved jackal skulls, not creepy at all. And every mirror in the house is either cracked, covered, or turned to the wall. Apparently, they believed mirrors trapped intentions. You decide not to check your reflection, just in case it decides to wink. The society prides itself on the idea that truth is always 2 steps behind presentation, and they practice this through staged illusions, historical reenactments, and elaborate dinner theater. Tonight's theme? The Bower. Fall of Troy starring bored nobles in sandals. The wine flows. The cheese is aged, possibly too aged, and someone keeps quoting Homer with a German accent. It's surreal and oddly brilliant. Your neighbor at dinner is a countess wearing a veil made from spider silk. She offers you candied ginger and casually mentions she once faked her own disappearance for a year just to see who would cry. Spoiler, not many. But I learned a lot, she says, chewing thoughtfully. Mainstream history says nothing about this society, which is half the point. They operated on the fringe of noble circles, thriving on their own absence. Their symbol? A compass with no cardinal directions, because of course it is. You're told about the disappearing ball, held once a decade, where each guest must vanish before midnight or be declared found and thereby expelled. A quirky tradition, sure, but one that somehow trained members in the art of stealth, escape, and information smuggling. Historians still argue whether this was metaphor or madness, though a few suspect the group helped ferry coded messages between Napoleonic camps during the wars. One even claims Der Nebelbund was behind the invisible ink craze of the late 18th century. You wonder if lemon juice still works. In tonight's gathering, they're discussing the fog rule, a belief that the more uncertain a person is about a story, the more powerful it becomes. Members take turns telling half-true accounts, of battles, betrayals, and lost cities, each ending with an unfinished sentence and a bow. It's like watching TED Talks performed by sleepwalkers. One old man tells of a prince who wore a different personality each day, then forgot which was his real one. He became all masks, the man concludes, so no one knew when he died. It's spooky, you write it down. Later, the society's leader, a woman known only as Der Nebelgeist, takes the stage. Her voice is soft, but commands the room like thunder under silk. History belongs to the loudest voice, she says, but the fog remembers the quietest moments. She unveils the society's oldest relic, a locket that opens to reveal not a photo, but a tiny etched maze. It's said no one has ever solved it, because it rearranges slightly every time someone opens it. Fringe theory? Definitely. But tonight, you believe it. The Fog Society had members in other countries too. Some say they inspired the Invisible College in England or the Veiled Circle of Venice. Others argue they were more fantasy than fact. But as you watch a noblewoman disappear behind a curtain and never re-emerge, you feel certain this one was real. As the night winds down, you're given a final test. You must leave without being seen, not just unnoticed, unremembered. You're helped by a soft cloak and a winding hall of curved mirrors designed to confuse both sight and sound. By the time you reach the outer door, you're not even sure you remember being here. Back in the carriage, dawn pale on the horizon, you carry no tokens, no robes, not even a name to recall the night. Just a whisper of fog on your sleeves and a sense that you've brushed against something slippery and sacred. You lean your head back. You've danced with kings in candlelit ruins, read star charts with smug astrologers, debated alchemy over tea, and mimicked rituals that blurred power and play. Some of these societies changed history. Some changed only themselves. But all were driven by the same electric thread, secrecy stitched through velvet and steel, ambition and fear. And now, as the wheels lull into rhythm once more, you find yourself wondering, what secret might you keep if no one would ever know? Word count, body 98. Wind down, 300 words. The sky softens now. Clouds stretch like gauze across a pale blue canvas. The journey has quieted, your thoughts like feathers, floating between the world you know and the ones hidden behind whispers and candlelight. You've walked shadowed halls and sat beside the mysterious. You've listened to the hush between secrets and stretched your imagination like silk across centuries. There were masks and codes, riddles and rituals, but always underneath it all, the simple human craving to belong, to matter, to glimpse power, even if only through keyholes. So now, as your breath slows and the real world fades just a little more, let it be okay not to have answers. Let it be enough to hold the question. The moon will wax and wane without your permission. The stars will spin overhead regardless of your knowledge of their names. You're safe here. Still, your hands are empty, but your dreams are full. Let the memory of candlelight guide you even in sleep. Let the sound of cloaked footsteps fade into silence. Let every door you passed stay closed, unless of course one opens in your dreams, and if it does, go ahead, step through. End of script. Sweet dreams.